right, here we are going live here, doing a little talk. It's the 1 year anniversary for planetary currents. So I figured I'd celebrate and talk about astrology a little bit and talk about planetary currents a little bit. Just kind of hang out for a minute. I can't really see the comments, so just so you know, I've got too many things going on here. I'm also recording this for a podcast, so yeah, I did it. It's been 1 year since I started this column, sort of like a column, Planetary Currents. It's on Instagram and Facebook, on my story and post each day. It's a very small little nibble, little bite. And I'm one of those people that, I'm pretty busy in life, and a lot of us are. Often don't have time to write more or read more myself. And so it kind of started as a way of exercising my astrology writing. I've been studying and considering myself an astrologer since I jumped in December of 98. But it kind of feels like I've spent most of my life not really putting myself out there in the world and sharing. So and from time to time, life has reflected back to me and encouraged me to share. I'm sure maybe you can relate in some way or part of your life where you've received encouragement from coming in the form of other people or whatever it may be to do something that you're passionate about or that you have a gift or a skill about. So I was told, and it was many years ago that I was on the School of Evolutionary Astrology message board quite frequently and used to post and write on there quite a bit when I was first learning evolutionary astrology, and went to one of these talks in Portland, and it was Steve Wolfson and David Green. Love them both. It was great. I love evolutionary astrology. They were great talks. And Steve kind of sat me down afterwards and kind of was very serious when he told me that, I had, he was encouraging me to keep writing and putting myself out there. But I kind of stopped for a long time. And share a little thing about myself. I've got a south node in the second house. I don't know if you know anyone or if you yourself have a south node in the second house, but it is house of Taurus, and it correlates to our relationship with ourself. Jeffrey Wolf Green would kind of talk about a second house Pluto or south node as a frog in the well phenomena, where we kind of get rooted down and stuck in our own little way or world, or retreat into ourself, and it takes more of an effort to engage externally, put oneself out there. And I can definitely relate to that, having a south node in the second house. So so I stayed retreated within myself for a very long time. And there's really the question too of, why do anything in life? I do love astrology. This is why I do this. And part of the reason that I started doing planetary currents is I enjoy looking at astrology every day and thinking about it, and said, why not start posting and sharing? So, a few people follow and enjoy it. And, sometimes, like we all do, perhaps, maybe not everybody, but, from time to time, we we question why we're doing something, or we doubt ourselves. And life has this way, if we're on a path, or if we're supposed to be on that path, it seems as though life has a way of reminding us what we're doing is valuable or helpful, and encourages us. And I kind of see that life itself reflects to us and reveals to us a way or a path forward in a lot of ways, if we can hear those clues, if we can really, we can hear them, but sometimes we just blow them off. But there's definitely been times where uh, I've had moments of like, why am I writing this? Why am I even doing this? I mean, I know I enjoy doing it, so I do it for myself, but sometimes you get to those moments where you're like, what's the point? Um, and when I've had those moments, I just had one a couple weeks ago. I don't know why, but I did. We do have those moments in life. No matter what you do, you might be get up one day and say, why am I doing this? What's the point of this? I had one of those days the other day, and then somebody said to me, every morning I open up and read your post to my partner. And I was, it was, like, wow. I'm like, thanks for sharing that with me. That's amazing. And then someone else, you know, ran into someone else, and they were like, thank you for posting. And we read your thing every day. And um, so I got that, thank you, life, for reminding me that, there's a couple people out there that find this valuable. As far as writing the little snippets, I've kind of always struggled with formats and sticking to some guidelines or rules. I'm an Aquarius, so also struggled a little bit with finding my own voice and just kind of putting something out there. First quarter Mercury Pluto square. Um, so I've done a lot of experimentation a little bit, along the way with what to write and how to write each day. Obviously, I look at the chart, but sometimes everything comes without looking at the chart, and I just focus on one thing that I already know is happening. Or if you've been following, you'll notice that I've sometimes gone off for days on one topic, and it's such a short little snippet, you can't really capture the full range of an archetype and all of its diverse manifestations. So uh, that's a little hard sometimes to know that you're only getting a little chip, a little nibble of the whole picture, and have to kind of let that go, and just know that it's only part of a larger or multiple potentials of how something might manifest or express. And in that way, I think that it's also been helpful, at least for me, to get over the idea of having it be perfect. There's no way I can perfectly encapsulate the full picture of what's happening in the cosmos, in the as above mirror reflecting this reality below. And of course, that's how I see it. Is it's life's holographic, and it is a big mirror, so to speak, that reflects life down here. And that's a really crazy idea, but I never knew that growing up, and it's part of the reason I was so blown away when I got into astrology. It's crazy. It's really crazy. I'm still blown away. So yeah, there's been times where I've had writer's block, so to speak, not sure what to write on. There was a time early on, I think it was in the summer, where I did this thing. I never really told anybody, telling you now. I guess I only did it for like a month or two, maybe, but it was kind of fun. Every now and then I might do this where I was drawing a tarot card, and the intention was that that card somehow had a message related to the astrology for that day. So the fun challenge of it was to study the card and see how that showed up in the astrology. So it's kind of fun, like where is this in the astrology of this day? Did that for a while, and it was pretty phenomenal, pretty amazing actually. The message and seeing how the message of the card was woven into the planetary positions, planetary currents going on. So I did that for a while, but then I broke free from that and just kind of inspired to write about some other archetype. Like I said, I love evolutionary astrology, and so a lot of times I'm just writing about little tidbits of the archetypes that are from the evolutionary astrology point of view. And that's one thing that, even though I studied for, I think, 11 years of astrology, I really struggled doing astrology readings back in the day, and I would over prepare myself, and the houses were always confusing a little bit to me. And evolutionary astrology really helped, I guess, kind of simplify things, just embracing that paradigm fully. It answered a lot of questions too that I didn't have answered. And it's been such an amazing paradigm to work with. Um, I did choose the Jeffrey Wolf Green's teachings of EA specifically. I know that a lot of people have studied with him and then started their own schools. It's a lot of the same similar material. Sometimes people don't include certain things. Some of his teachings are maybe a little controversial, but like the whole concept of the second house in Taurus as an archetype, and in evolutionary astrology, it's first correlates with survival. That's a pretty interesting concept. And obviously in this reality today, we have this concept of money that is representative of resources, and that's how we survive, a lot of people. So it makes sense that the second house correlates to resources and money then. But when I first read that, it was kind of weird. I was like, why does the second house correlate to money or resources? And so evolutionary astrology has kind of helped me with that core meaning of the archetypes, reprogrammed my brain in a lot of ways. So yeah, I post the planetary nodes each day. They're pretty subtle influences, and I use the geocentric nodes, which I found to be really helpful in natal chart readings. And it's been a little more of an experiment for myself just to see how they may show up by watching them with transit. It's this little subtle background layer of energy dynamics. They're definitely subtle, and I'm not saying I recommend them for beginners or even it's kind of a lot. There's a lot in the chart to begin with, and depending on how many points and asteroids and other things you use, can just be kind of overwhelming. So sometimes I talk about the nodes occasionally, but I still keep posting them just because it's a reference material if anyone's out there that wants to look at them and see where they are and think about it. Maybe they're transiting something in your chart that you notice, or especially when a planet in the sky is aligned with the nodes, I might highlight that. It adds a little extra layer of encouraging or re-emphasizing an archetype or a pattern. And I think that's something that we do when we look at an astrology chart. You might see one theme and represented, or that starts, but then when you see that theme repeated 2 or 3 or 4 times, and then you see the nodes are also reinforcing that theme or not, you've got, you're getting extra information. So definitely looking for the major themes that get repeated to a certain degree always. Is there anything else I wanted to say? Let me check my notes here. That was kind of it. Just, I have a couple thoughts on, I've been reading about Aquarius because Pluto's in Aquarius, and then I recently read Venus in Aquarius in Pluto Book 2, and it's interesting because, so I was going to share a little bit about this Aquarius dynamic with groups of 3, and got a couple other things to share with you today. The thing that's interesting about Aquarius is if you studied evolutionary astrology, Pluto and Aquarius archetype, the teaching speaks to that there's these different responses to Pluto and Aquarius. So if you have Pluto, well, nobody alive has Pluto and Aquarius. So, I mean, basically. But if you have Pluto in the 11th house, that's well, okay. Well, no, people are being born with Pluto and Aquarius, but, people who are older, they would have to be 200 and 40 some years, something like that. But if you're born with Pluto in the 11th and you see that in a chart, the idea is that you're considering that the soul's desire is to liberate in some fashion, right? From what? So so one of the concepts is that the response can be very Saturnian, in which case the liberation or the outside the box is very much outside the box of the consensus culture, and it will be a common thing where you'll see somebody going back to an older way or model that was also part of the culture. It's not totally outside of the culture, but it's just kind of like a throwback or revert to something in the past that's different than the present. It's like society's doing this now, and they're like, no, we should go back to be doing this. They have a different voice or a message. They're thinking differently, but they're still operating or functioning within the consensus mindset, or so to speak, right? And then you've got this individuating phenomena where you've got folks and souls that are trying to break free, so they're doing something new or different, and in this way they're evolving the consensus culture, but within that individuating piece, you've got the individuals that maybe like also still need to feel secure by connecting with some group. Aquarius 11th house correlates with groups, so you've got this phenomena where you want to liberate, but you're also looking for your people that have that same shared desire of what your shared cause of what you're breaking free from. And so you find your people, and so there's still a Saturnian element there, because in this case you're identifying with the shared values of the group, whereas some folks, as Jeffrey would always say, is who has the courage to stand as a group of one. Some folks are out there by themselves doing something totally radical and different, and they may have nobody by their side, and it's pretty uncomfortable for most of us, but they're still out there doing it because that's just where they're at. And that's the full Uranian radical Aquarius vibe there. and it's pretty wild, and it's pretty threatening to the consensus and the status quo. It's so unpredictable. It's can't really be boxed in or contained at all. And so you've got this concept in that regard. So the interesting thing was, when I was reading this Venus in Aquarius with my friend, I realized that I've got 3 people in my life that are really close to me with Venus in Aquarius, and 2 of them have they've completely unplugged from any social media whatsoever, and the other one is he definitely uses it quite a bit and loves technology. Um, and so with the Venus and Aquarius type, there's also three groups, three different groups of Venus and Aquarius, so to speak, that are spoken to if you read this teaching in evolutionary astrology. And again, one of the Venus and Aquarius groups is their value system is something that is different than the consensus, but again, it's this throwback idea, something from the past, which a little bit correlates to this whole like Saturn group. And then you've got the Saturn Aquarius group, and then you've got the full-on Aquarius group. So it's a very similar thing. So some people with Venus and Aquarius have this. The idea is, though, that their value system is always going to be breaking free from the consensus in some way, but in the more Saturnian route, there's this throwback to older ways of culture. In the middle paths with the Uranus Saturn flare, so to speak, they're considering themselves outside of the norm, and they're looking for people who really they resonate with. Birds of a feather flock together. There's this energetic resonance and law of attraction, especially with Venus and Aquarius, with finding the people who do have some kind of shared values that are different, and they share in their vision of how society could be different and evolve. And then you've got the whole hog Uranus folks who are just so super out there, and they could be super disruptive, and society and other groups don't know what to do with them, and they're willing to stand by themselves. It's pretty interesting. So the thing that I thought was really fascinating about this was that there's actually one of my friends was sharing that they identified with all 3 of these roles at different times in their life, and could kind of see that themselves being each of these roles. And it kind of made me realize that that's how it is with the archetypes a lot of times, where we can identify with maybe a whole spectrum of the archetypes and experience. Now, there might be very much so an overarching theme or group that in the Venus and Aquarius that the person falls into of one of those 3. But at the same time, you could, in some ways, be going back to something that's in the past in one way. In one way, you could be standing out on your own. In another way, you could really be connecting with your people. So it's just kind of one of those things that sometimes, astrology, evolutionary astrology, and what Jeffrey always taught was it's based on observation and correlation. And so it's not like there are rules that we follow, but then you really have to observe the nature of the individual and how their life is, and see how things are playing out. And you can find a whole diversity of these. You can find paradoxes within ourselves. We can be, desiring different things at the same time, expressing multiple parts of archetypes at the same time, of course. So couple of other thoughts I just thought I'd share today is the Pluto's gone into Aquarius, and Pluto in Capricorn seems like it really brought a lot of what's the word? I'm gonna say like red tape, rigmarole, restriction, standardization. Everything's got a form and a process, and then the next form, and then the next thing to do, and tracked, and da 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 da. Um, Not really a big fan of all that. And one of the examples is that when my kids were in elementary school, I did a couple things where I was going into the classroom and teaching some geometry, and that was pretty fun. And we were talking about, this is an alternative school housed in a public school, a little charter, and we were talking about setting up more opportunities to come in and doing some more things. But the teacher, whom I love so dearly, was expressing to me that it's just, she's like, well, it used to be that I would just say yes, but now there's so many minutes that we have to do for this, and I've got so many minutes for that. And like everything was dialed in so much in the public school system to exactly how many minutes and hours and days of each class and each thing that they're doing, and standardizing these curriculums and these tests. And I'm sure you're probably somewhat familiar with this. The point is, it is very seeing that progress over the last 2 decades, this Pluto and Capricorn era. I can't remember the exact dates right now, but I don't think it was actually 2 full decades. But um, it's there's a lot of things in life that the the evolutionary path with Pluto and Capricorn is its polarity Cancer. And I was saddened a lot often by noticing that a lot of human beings in their positions, in their roles, in their Capricornian jobs, were so into following the what we quote should be doing, that the room for this, what I saw as more of our humanity in the Cancerian polarity of just kind of empathy and really just responding to an emotional plea of a situation, whereas Capricorn can be so unyielding, where it's like, nope, it's this and that's it, and there's no room to move outside the box. And I we did do that a lot with Pluto and Capricorn. I think as a society in a lot of ways, and in that way, I think that it hasn't been healthy in all ways by any means. The evolutionary tension of Pluto and Capricorn. And granted, there's been a lot of growth in the polarity, and most people are very aware of these concepts of emotional wisdom. And there's just been so much into Cancer and wanting to create, a world where everyone is safe, where everyone is secure, where we can really come into our own identity, whatever that is. There's been a lot of evolution in this regard, of course, during this period. But like I was saying, there's been this swing the other way. There's been resistance. And of course, Capricorn, Saturn, 10th house, correlates to social norms and social conditions. And in some regard, there's been a fear of deviating too far from quote normal with this. And so you have this polarization that's happened with Pluto and Capricorn. I can almost see that Pluto and Capricorn in some capacity intensified polarization, because it represents the evolution of the consensus standard, and there's just going to be resistance to that inherently. Especially, the other piece of this, of course, is that the existing reality structure is serving certain entities and individuals in the form of resources and power. And so to keep maintaining this structure of reality, they maintain their security access to power and control. And obviously we've seen a lot of progressive rebellion on this. This has been talked about for a long, long time. But as Pluto was in Capricorn, it's built up so much to a head. And now we see how the entire world is this global economy, and a very few tiny percent of the people are got most of the resources on lockdown. And it's kind of problematic situation, that predicament that we find ourselves in, which correlates to this Pluto and Capricorn going to these extremes. So it's kind of been building up, of course. So that does set the stage for Pluto and Aquarius. But circling back to what I was, my original thought with education is, we've seen the Pluto and Capricorn affect so many stages of areas of life, and education has been, at least in my opinion, it's been very sad situation to see how much has been affected. So I say all this to say that I have hope, Pluto and Aquarius, because if you think about it, the humans, the children that went through the education system while Pluto was transiting Capricorn, we have this whole generation of Pluto and Sag folks. And in evolutionary astrology, Sagittarius correlates with natural law. And I think, in a nutshell, we're talking about these souls went through an education system that is not let's say, like, a natural way of learning. Like, it's not really conducive to learning in a lot of ways. It's kind of repressive and stifling, and when you have a good teacher, it can make all the difference no matter where you are. But the system is the system, and it's made it harder, and yeah, I think that the education system needs a lot of reform, basically. And of course, this is not a new idea, and people have been talking about this for a long time. But while we've been talking about it, and while some folks have branched off and done, private schools and charters and alternative routes and unschooling and homeschooling, and, there's always been an effort to seek alternate routes. But meanwhile, the mainstream public schools have gotten further and further down this path of standardization, Pluto and Capricorn. How far will this go? How far will this insanity go? And that's where I see that Pluto and Aquarius is definitely going to shift this with the Pluto and Sag generation. And of course, Aquarius and Sagittarius form this natural sextile to each other. So I'm not like putting it on the Pluto Sag generation as like an expectation that they're going to do it, but I just think that they naturally will be leading the way on this, because they went through the system at its most extreme Capricornian rigid existence. They had to live through this, and coming out on the other side, I think that they're going to kind of grow up and have this Pluto and Aquarius kind of like the light bulbs going to go on even more. I mean, I think they already know it, but I think it's going to be like, aha, you know what? That was messed up. That was completely messed up. This is not a good system. Like, why have we pushed so far, and what will the reform look like for education? I don't know, but I definitely have hopes for new approaches and new perspectives, and a change of breaking this up more. We'll see, but I think that, looking to the youth to lead the way, of course, back to this whole idea of, Aquarius as an archetype evolving, Capricorn, the consensus norms. We're going to be seeing a lot of that with Pluto and Aquarius, but also the youth as a group. It represents Aquarius in a certain capacity, because the youth are always coming up and wanting to do things differently with how they see reality is running. So, definitely it'll be one to watch, to these Pluto Sages. I think that they're gonna bring a lot of great discussion, and obviously Pluto and Sag correlate with philosophy and ideas. We already have some of them getting involved in politics, the collective conversation. I think they're going to bring some really interesting things. So I'm excited for that myself. To see the progressive diversity of this reality, progressive breakup of this Pluto and Capricorn era being on lockdown. So I had a couple other thoughts, but I think that I'm just going to throw out one other thought at you here, one other idea that I've been chewing on, and that is this idea about, I don't know if I'm going to go through the whole cycle here, but the zodiac's basically this archetypal cycle of life, right? There's these 12 phases to this cycle, and if you think about Pisces as, Aries is the first part of the cycle, but there's an Aries because there's a Pisces, so to speak. There is the infinite ocean of potentialities. There is consciousness itself. Like, everything we see in the material world first came from consciousness, first came from, it got manifested and brought in some capacity. And so anything that's possible in the future is already essentially existing or swirling around in this Pisces ocean of collective consciousness. And then, there's Aries, right? So it's like things are going to emerge from the ocean of potentialities. And in evolutionary astrology, Aries is desire. That's the lower octave of Pluto Scorpio soul's desire. And so this desire is what brings things forward out of the realm of potentialities into the realm of experience. Is we want to try something. Maybe you're like, hey, I want to learn piano. That sets you on a whole journey. Like, I think I'm going to go back to school and become a nurse. That's a whole journey, and I think I'm going to move across the country. Whatever desire that we have coming up, we have lots of desires that come up all the time. And maybe we could even call them impulses. It's just like a constant, we see these constant like impulses and desires of like, oh, do that, do that, do that. So they're little sparks, but not all of them get acted upon, right? And so that's kind of like this interface of Aries and Pisces, is this emergence in consciousness of these desires, these possibilities. We don't act on all of them, but then, some we do. And if we look at our life, we've acted on a lot of things, we've initiated a lot of things, Aries, but we haven't carried those things through the zodiac. So Taurus following Aries, like I was saying earlier, the root of Taurus is survival. And so you're going to initiate something, Aries, but is that project, is that activity, is that venture going to survive? Well, if we get to the Taurus phase, we're going to put forth the effort to substantiate it, to have it be established. This is the Taurus phase. It's just a natural thing that follows. If we want it to exist, then it's more than just the spark. It's then we have to really own it. We have to put in the effort. So Taurus is interesting like that. And so basically, like, there's so many things that Aries cycle starts, but they don't really reach the Taurus phase, or they actually die in the Taurus phase. Like, we just don't put forth the effort, and they stagnate or stall. And of course, Taurus has gotten this reputation for being lazy sometimes, and I think that it's like in Aries we've had the courage to begin the thing, and in Taurus we establish it. But do we really want to put forth the effort? Does it really have that much meaning? Like, this is the Taurus, and not everything's going to or does. So it's not a matter of having judgment or being upset with ourselves, or some things are just not going to make the cut. They're just going to be initiated. It's like that idea of do this 100 times, or if you're a photographer, it's like, how many photos do you take, and then how many do you get, right? So there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of things that are started. How much of them go through Taurus to become truly established? The thing with Taurus is, mention that frog in the well scenario, is when things become really established, they become very rooted or fixed. It's the fixed earth sign of all the fixed signs. So it's probably the most fixed of the fixed signs. It can be the most rooted, the most unmovable. I mean, if you ever try to rush a Taurus, I've got Mars and Taurus people in my life, and it doesn't really work to rush them. You got to tell them that you're leaving like 15 minutes earlier than you are, and even then it's just they catch on. And yeah, but so with whatever has been initiated, when it becomes really established in that one area, it's just rooted, down. And that's what it needed to do in the Taurus phase, is to become totally established. And at some point, that level of yin internalization of the energy reaches a climax, so to speak. It reaches a peak where it's done what it needs to do by going fully inward, by fully rooting in and being fully established. And the only way to keep evolving through the cycle is then yang to go back outward. So if you think about going to Gemini from Taurus, it's a pretty drastic shift. I mean, all the signs have a really dramatic, energetic shift from one to the other. Taurus is so different than Gemini, as it is different from Aries. And so, it's about actually coming out of the well. It's coming out of our cave, whatever you want to call it, and getting curious about the world around us, instead of this deep inner focus on just what we've been working on and establishing. We like, okay, you've established it, and now consider how this is going to evolve if you branch out a little bit, and I think of plants a lot in this sense. Is, at the Aries phase, you've got that taproot is like, it's just like busted through the kernel of the seed. I mean, the courage and the effort for this little seed, this little taproot to just break through, that's very Aries, starts the adventure. And of course, Taurus is that root is going down into the earth, and it's like, here I come, I'm gonna establish myself in this spot. And then it's time to branch out, and that's Gemini. And also in a sense of, also like flowering would be a Gemini, mutable air sign, so different than Taurus. It's really becoming curious, and we have our own thoughts and ideas, but like, what else is there out there? Like, are we actually exploring other possibilities? If we only proceed with something as we've established it from the beginning, is it going to evolve? And so this Gemini phase requires this pollination of ideas, this research and this exploration of consideration of, okay, you've established it in a very physical, real way, but now take it into the air element. Actually consider it from a more objective, abstract way, in the realm of thought, in how you see it, and how it could be seen in multiple different ways. Like, what actually is this thing that began in Aries that you put forth all this effort to establish? And so in Gemini, there's this whole exploration of, well, what is it becoming? And that is eventually, after a great exploration through the Gemini phase, we get into this, what we call the first quarter square, and the transition between Gemini and Cancer, the 90-degree point from the start, is, of course, what we refer to as this crisis in action. And that was, I believe, Dane Rudger popularized that, I think. Definitely have read his writing on that. And Jeffrey Wolf Green added to that concept as, so in evolutionary astrology, Cancer represents the identity of the thing. So this whole concept of those first three phases, even though it was initiated and established and then explored what it really could be, it hasn't yet fully formed the identity of what it is until we get to this Cancerian phase of whatever we're talking about, right? So what Jeff would talk about is, like, this whole concept of, like, what hat will you wear, or what form will it take? It's this crisis in action. And I believe the Sabian symbol is, on a ship, sailors lower the old flag and raise a new one. And it talks about this change in allegiance or alliance there. So it's kind of this very crucial moment where the crisis or the stress is that to cross the threshold into the next phase, we actually do need to choose what form. We need to kind of settle on an identity that this is going to be, like, like, what's the name of this? What actually is this thing? And the resistance to going forward would be to want to stay in the realm of possibilities and well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, I'm not sure, right? So you'd be kind of like staying in the Gemini phase because you're not ready to really settle on, it's going to be this. This is the name. This is what it's going to be. This is actually what it is. So yeah, I mean, the Taurus phase, it got established, but that's like literally laying the groundwork, but it hadn't, in this cycle, it hasn't yet fully come into its identity of what it's going to become until we reach the Cancer phase. And once And once we're fully in the Cancer phase, and we fully make the decision of what direction we're going and what it's going to be, considering that Cancer is a cardinal water sign, so it is an action sign. So essentially, the identity that is associated with in Cancer is part of what gives it this action or momentum forward, if that makes sense. Because it's, from that place, we go into the Leo phase where it's like, okay, we've actually formed an identity. We've got of what this is going to be, and from that we go into this yang fire Leo sign. We expand. It's from the identity of Cancer that we come into the Leo full expression of what this is. So if we hadn't become secure in the identity in Cancer, we can't then go out and fully express and grow into the Leo phase, right? They follow each other, and they're very different, but they build on each other through the cycle in this way. And you've probably heard this if you studied astrology, but the first 5 signs are considered this individual journey, and then the next phase is Virgo, and then the rest of the zodiac's considered the collective journey. So to go from Leo, we've brought it into the fullness of its expression of what it is, as it's come from the original individual impulse. Leo has this trine back to Aries, so it's like it's still kind of like it's come to the fullness from its original spark, but it needs refinement, and that's the Virgo phase. So, the problem, or I say problem, but the challenge is in the Leo phase, it's just like so exciting because it's just like full on expression of what it is. But then the Virgo phase is like, well, that's great. And have you considered that it would be really helpful if you fine-tuned this, or if you did this, or you're doing a great job with this, but there's feedback and criticism in the Virgo phase, which is very humbling, and it is this preparation. It's a transitional phase to go into the social sphere at Libra. So if we can be humble enough to receive from life and others what is necessary to fine-tune something, to just make those adjustments and improve it, these are all very Virgonian things, then the thing gets tweaked and fine-tuned and improved until it's actually ready to cross over the opposition point, the 180, and then be entered into being truly shared in the outer social realm. And it may be being shared in the other parts too, like you think Leo in terms of being on stage and performing, and it's true. I mean, things are being shared on the other part, but in terms of this evolution of a thing, of whatever began, there's also this, it kind of like has to come into its original fullness of the original spark, and then it needs to be refined, and then it can enter in to the social sphere and be ready in Libra. And of course, the phenomena at the crisis at the 180 point is that once we start realizing that it's not perfect or not ready, we go into a Virgo crisis, and that crisis can kind of just be like, it's not ready, it's not good enough, and then it doesn't make it into, it could stall out at the Virgo phase, right? Because it's just not ready. It's never ready. opposite of the ever ready, never ready. So that could happen, um, and it could take lifetimes, but eventually we're ready. It's ready, ready for the next step to share, to bring forward the thing, whatever it is. So we do into Libra, and that, you know, that's the effort, is like we're actually going to share this thing with the world. And then once we're in Libra, I mean, Libra is about, you know, it's learning uh, balance, and it's kind of extreme at first. So when you first come forward with something, it could enter in and be very extreme, and so you're learning to balance that, and it's learning to be uh, learning to give and receive and share. Um, the thing that happens in Libra, I think, is because it's being received, then it's being given back to based on what was given. There's this exchange, energetic exchange. And once it's in the world, in whatever fashion or form or whatever it is, in Libra, once it's been shared, then you have to consider what happens in Scorpio's the next phase, where it's kind of inevitable that then it's mingling. It's out there and it's mingling, and it's going to evolve in some capacity. It's been shared. Other people have experienced this, whatever it is. And so then in Scorpio, it evolves somehow. Of course, we know that Scorpio, eighth house, represents birth and death and regeneration. So it could be that it's shared and then it just kind of dies. But if it does die at this phase, there's a good chance that it could be also reborn, so to speak, um, in a metamorphosis, in a new form than what it was before. Um, and as it evolves, and I mean, we're all contributing energetically to this collective experience. So once we put ourselves out there, Libra, into the social sphere, or put something out there, whatever it is, it begins to be part of the collective evolution in Scorpio. And from that, Sagittarius, then it expands. It expands outward further into the collective. Um, so and so that's just a natural part of the cycle there, as this journey goes on, and as that thing that was new has begun to shape and influence the world and expand outward into it, then in Capricorn, Saturn, it eventually becomes part of the culture, becomes part of the reality. It also there's also a piece of this where, like, there's only so far that something will do this yang fire expansion outward. Everything has its inherent Capricorn limits and time frame of what it's actually going to do. So in the Capricorn phase, we see that something kind of becomes part of the culture and the reality, but it also reaches the point where it's reached its maximum life and growth, and contracts and has a limit on how far it's going to go. And it also kind of at some point crystallizes, so to speak. It becomes the reality of what it is, to the point that it, Aquarius then needs to begin to shift and change. It needs, so what was once new and evolved and expanded, and then becomes part of Saturn Capricorn consensus, Once it becomes part of the norm, then it's inevitable that for evolution to occur, that needs to shift and change. We need to start thinking outside the box of what that is in some capacity. So enter Aquarius to invent with this in some way. And Aquarius, of course, could also be considered part of the breakdown, in the sense of even just like blowing glass, right? Like the heat and the expansion is very Sag, and then this Saturnian form, and then Aquarius, Uranus, you just it's going to break someday. The glass is going to break and shatter, and then all of those pieces of glass will slowly break down and return to sand, the ocean of soil. Everything will go back to Pisces in some point, and the rigid, clearly defined form that it is in Capricorn is going to start to shift or change in Aquarius before it reaches its point of totally dissolving back into the ocean in Pisces. And so everything kind of goes through this cycle. This is the cycle, and anything can stay at one point in the cycle for a day, a week, a month, a year, lifetimes. And that's part of the concept of evolutionary astrology, is basically like because we have a birth chart and because we can look and see where someone has their Pluto, which represents the soul's desire, we can see what part of this cycle that they've been evolving through for lifetimes. And we can see what their souls just wanting to do, why they reincarnated. So it's pretty crazy. I think it's insane. I mean, I never knew what my soul, I never had a context to say what my soul wanted to do, you know what I'm saying? How do you know that? How do you know that without reaching some great enlightenment? Or in this case, we've got evolutionary astrology. The thing is, what the soul wants to do can be so different than what uh, society has laid out as potential paths forward or options for us, that it's confusing. And so I'll just share that I've got a Pluto in the 7th house of relationship, Pluto in Libra in the 7th. And this means that my soul's evolutionary path is Aries in the 1st house. What does that mean? And obviously, if your soul's evolutionary path is to do Aries in the 1st house, I mean, like in this society and culture, Aries is it's seen a certain way. It's seen in terms of, like somebody that can be really like a go-getter, someone that's a risk taker, but it's all in context of this concept of Capricornian success in the world. There's this measuring of how successful you are. So, I mean, I've seen people who have, say, Saturn and Aries in the 1st house, and they've struggled because their entire reality, Saturn, has been defined by starting over and trial and error, and they've done a gazillion different jobs and whatnot. And obviously, Aries squares Capricorn. Saturn and Aries is not really necessarily an easy combination, but it's not helped because of this culture that we're living in right now, because this culture is saying that this is the definition of success. You're born with Saturn in the 1st house. Who's going to help you break out of that concept and let you actually accept who you are, and that who you are may never fit the definitions of quote unquote success that society has laid forward, or they're not going to show you a path that really resonates for you, because that's just the nature of where we're at and what we're living in. There's been I don't know what even to call it. It's been heavily conditioned, basically reality, and conditioned and controlled, attempted to be controlled in a lot of ways and shaped. And so if you're in the process of self-discovery, that's an Aries thing, Aries first house. If your entire, if your moon is in the first house, you're in the process of discovering your own identity. What does that mean? Because in this culture, that's not seen as something that's really great or positive. That's seen as a weakness. Like, you don't even know who you are. It's like this firmly established and knowing who you are. Well, here in evolutionary astrology, we have a paradigm that can be like, hey, you're actually in this process of self-discovery regarding Saturn in the first, your whole reality, Moon in the first, your identity, or, the Pluto polarity, Aries first, that in that case, the soul's compulsion would be Libra relationship. And so the evolution is through discovering who one is outside of relationship. And that these kind of concepts, if they're the underpinnings of the entire soul's reality, but they have nothing to do with the underpinnings of society's structure, you have a natural crisis for souls being born into this reality. So what do? We search. We're born and we're looking to make sense of life in some capacity, some way. And it's like, if you have Saturn retrograde, you're not gonna to necessarily conform to the reality of the consensus culture that you're born into. And so you're looking for something that makes sense outside of the box of this. How do you find that? And we all have our individual journey and way of going there, and there's no right or wrong way about it. We just get to where we're going. So gonna wrap this up, and I feel like just kind of, I think what I wanted to do tonight was just play. Just one of the things that I've struggled with is just being myself and being relaxed and being me and talking like how I like to talk about astrology. And so I think that this actually was a little bit of that. I always tell people like some of my greatest stuff is just like off the cuff. I'll know somebody and know their chart, and then I'll see something and then just be like, shh, and just kind of drop something. But so yeah, part of planetary currents and part of this talk tonight is this ongoing theme of just finding my own voice and learning how to talk about what I love and share that. And if there's one person out there that's appreciating it or getting something out of this, that's great. I love that. Okay, wish you the best.